いただいたタレッシュ・シーパーサンさんのセッションです。先進的なマジェントセキュリティ、静的解析の導入ということでお話しいただきます。よろしくお願いします。
Thank you. So we're going to change to English a little bit. If you want to switch to channel 1 for Japanese. I have the slides online. You could download them, and it's case sensitive, so you don't need to take photos. And this is going to be a technical talk. So we'll get into a little bit of a code and maybe a demo if we have time. But I want to talk about proactive Magento security. And I know it's called part 2, and you haven't been there for part 1, but don't worry about that. You'll find out why it's okay you missed part 1 soon. But before I get into that, I want to take a look at where we are right now with Magento security. We all know security is important, okay? And sorry, my slide notes are missing all of a sudden. And when it comes to e-commerce security, we have customers' identity and credit cards, and we have the bad guys, the hackers. And between these two, there's a first line of defense. And that first line of defense is comprised of Magento headquarters, the Magento core team, and us. We work with Magento, and we are part of this first line of defense. And we're going to look at a little bit of what's going on here right now. So first, let's talk about what Magento headquarters is doing. They're doing an excellent job of accepting bug reports, looking at vulnerabilities, and figuring out what needs to be changed and when to change it. But the thing is, sometimes things don't go as planned. Some people are laughing here because SUPI 8788 didn't go as smoothly as what everyone would think about it, or what they would like to come from Magento when it comes to a security patch or a security update. But why is it the case? Obviously, it's because security is difficult. But what does that really mean? Why is security difficult, especially with Magento? And I could explain this to you, but it's easier to sum it up with something that someone else has said. And this is something that was said by Bruce Schneier, who is very famous in cryptography and security research. And he actually mentioned this in a famous essay, you could get a link here, in 1999. So this is over 15 years old. He had said that as systems get more complex, security will get worse. And I highly suggest you read this if you're interested in thinking about the way security applies to Magento. And there's a reason why security is difficult in Magento, because Magento is very complex. If you dig down and you look into Magento, the code does a lot of things. And especially with Magento 2, Hirokazu earlier today showed how much more lines of code Magento 2 has. And the thing is, what we do is we add themes, we add extensions, we add a lot of stuff to Magento, and we add complexity to the system. And if we're adding complexity to Magento, that means we're possibly making the security worse in Magento. And any changes we make to Magento, we have to be aware that our changes, we have to be responsible for the security of the changes that we add to Magento and the systems that we're putting out. But we don't always do this. And I know why, because if you're working for a merchant, your goal is to make as much sales as possible. And if you're working for an agency building Magento sites for someone else, it's really hard to bill hours for security work, because that's time that your merchant would probably want to spend money on making something that will bring them more money. And even if you're working for an extension maker, usually your drive is to put more features or put out a new extension as opposed to building security for your existing extensions. I understand that there are various problems outside of what you want that's preventing you from doing the security work. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality, because money pays the bills. So we need to do something about it. We can't leave it as it is. But so that's where I have a solution, and I've been working on a couple solutions. And there's an English term for this called tackling the low-hanging fruit. I don't know what it is in Japanese, but basically what my goal is to encourage the Magento community to take the steps that cost the least effort and the least amount of time of developers, but will have the biggest effect when it comes to protecting the stores, protecting the customers, their identities, and their credit cards. And if I were to do all of this today, I'd be talking for days. Like, it'll be Friday and I'll still be talking about it. So I've had to split up my drive to improve security in the Magento community. And I'm incredibly lucky that, the Meet Magento Association has these events around the world. And, I have the opportunity to do this, frequently enough that I can communicate ideas across. I've been talking a lot about this plan of mine, and I just want to give you a background of where I've been so far and why this is part 2. So when I started down this road in the United States and Spain last year, I did a talk at Meet Magento called A Trail Map for Magento Security. And that was all about how to think about security when you're building an e-commerce store, an extension or something. And the way I see it is that's the least amount of effort you need. You just need to think about it differently, but it gives you the biggest effect, okay? And I encourage you to go look at that video. It describes how you think about, how to protect a Magento store specifically. Then after that, I spent some time talking about the OWASP Top 10, which is also part about thinking, because the second talk I did was using the internal tools in Magento. There was nothing external. It's like, here's the features in Magento that you could use to protect your store, your customers, and your credit card information. Then I started getting a little bit more detail, where you actually have to do a little bit more work, not just think, okay? I did a talk in Poland and Spain this year called Proactive Magento Security Part 1, and it was about security logging. Unfortunately, there's no video for that up right now because there's been a problem with the video. Yeah, so as soon as the video comes online, I will tweet it out. And I know I've been talking about myself a lot, but here's my contact information. If you need to get a hold of me, Twitter is usually the best place. My name is pronounced Talesh. If you can't pronounce it, that's okay, it's unique enough. But yeah, this list of talks I've been giving, there's a reason why you don't need to know part 1 to get to part 2, because they're all tools and techniques. So if I'm going to teach you to be a carpenter, I don't need to teach you how to use a hammer before I teach you how to use a screwdriver. They're 2 different tools, okay? I just number them part 1 and part 2 because I want someone to look at them all or review them all. So you don't really need to know part 1 today to get into part 2. But let's talk about part 2 for a bit. Static analysis. I think this is like the second thing that, with a little bit more effort than security logging, is going to have a big effect on the code that you put out for Magento. And does anyone know what static analysis means? No. Yes, a couple people. So basically what static analysis is, and it's you're analyzing code and you're doing so statically. So what a static analysis tool does, it goes into the code that you write and it searches for vulnerabilities, bugs, any sort of, and in the case of this talk, security concerns in the code that you make, be it vulnerabilities that you introduce or that you bring in from an extension that you're adding to Magento. We want to use a tool to find these problems before you publish the code to your site, okay? And there's a couple features of static analysis that makes it stand out from various other security tools that we use, like dynamic analysis and these sorts of things. And the first thing is that Static analysis looks at the source code, okay? It doesn't open up the web page while it's running and try to send inputs. It only works with the source code. The other important feature of static analysis is that it happens during the implementation of your code, okay? My part one talk was about security logging. That's something you need to think about during planning your modifications. But this one is to do with implementation. This happens during implementation. And static analysis is an automated tool. It's because we're dealing with very large code bases, we don't want to go through and manually look for security problems. So we want a tool that will do this in an automated fashion. But it is not automatic, okay? The static analysis tool will not go in and say, this is a bug, this is a security vulnerability, and you should do this instead. It doesn't know what you're trying to do, okay? It's just automated enough to say, here's a place in your code where you may be doing something dangerous, okay? And the important thing is why I can do that is because, as I've said, Magento is very complex. It's got to be able to understand what's happening in Magento, okay? So it's only an aid to help you find the places in code where there may be a problem. And the important thing is, you still need to do the work. Poor Ben's not looking at the slide. You still need to do the work to fix the problems, okay? I know this sounds like bad news that you have to do work with an automated tool. Unfortunately, there's more bad news. In preparation for this talk, I went through all the static analysis tools that I could find that are open source and says that they do static analysis of PHP for security reasons. So these things will look at PHP and tell you if there's a problem with your PHP code. Unfortunately, none of them work. None of them work well with Magento. They either give you a lot of false positives, they keep telling you there's security vulnerabilities in your code where there isn't any, or they may just let actual vulnerabilities slip right through. So I spent a lot of time in summer trying to find a tool and make this thing work. And I remember Hirokazu was asking me, when's the preparation for this talk? When's your talk information's coming? And I kept on pushing it back because I was getting very depressed. Every single tool I used was not working with Magento. So like any smart person, I put away my computer for a couple of weeks and I went hiking in the mountains for a few weeks and then I came back down, hoping I'd be wiser, but fortunately not. At the end of the day, we still had the same problem. Magento was very complex. And none of these tools understood Magento. So I went back and I said, okay, so let's look at the features of static analysis that we want. And I'm just going to quickly go over a couple slides. It needs to be automated, it needs to work on the source code, and it needs to happen during implementation phase only, okay? And most importantly, it needs to understand the complexity of Magento, which is the big problem. And it's got to only be an aid. So I was stuck. And reviewing all of this, I kind of came up with a solution. It's not a perfect solution. It gets us, I'd say 75 to 80% of the way there, but using the combination of tools that I'm going to show you now, you'd have a reasonable chance of deflecting attacks that we are seeing right now on Magento stores and e-commerce stores in general. And there's two parts to this open source grouping of tools for static analysis that I've come up with. One part is software-centric, in that it only applies to the software. And the second part is developer-centric. When I say developer-centric, I mean it will be looking at the places where a developer may have been making mistakes while writing code, as opposed to looking at the code and saying, yeah, there's something going on here. It kind of works with the way the developers are talking. And there's a word for this developer-centric review of code, and If you're developers, you might know what it is. So think about it while I talk about the first one, the software-centric one. So 2 open source tools which will help us analyze our code before it goes out on the live side. And the first one is running an antivirus, ClamAV. And I specifically suggest using ClamAV because there's a couple things. First of all, I've had problems where I picked up a site and someone said, okay, here's the GitHub, and I tried to check it out and I couldn't get the code because my antivirus was blocking me from getting the code because there was a virus on a template. Okay? And it has happened on a Magento site before. I'm not going to give any more details, that's just an NDA. But what I really like about ClamAV, and I know it sounds terrible that I'm standing here telling you to run an antivirus, but I'm specifically telling you to run ClamAV, which is free, open source, and runs on all platforms, because it matches against the Google Safe Browsing list. So even if a single template in your Magento store somehow has a link to a site that publishes viruses or malware or anything like that, ClamAV will tell you about it. And that's something a lot of people don't realize, that you need something looking at the code, because no one's manually going to look through all your template files to make sure that there's no links to a malware site. So, as I said, first one, incredibly easy. Just run ClamAV. It's free, it runs on all platforms, and I'm not going to show you how to install it on your IDEs. The second one, which is the interesting one I was talking to you about, is developer-centric. So what is this development mechanism where we talk about where a developer may be doing something wrong? Anyone have an idea of what it's called? When the code kind of looks like something's going wrong. So what it's called in the PHP world, at least, is called code smells. And would you know it, we have a free open source piece of software that will detect code smells. And it's called PHP Sniffer, PHP Code Sniffer. And the really, really nice thing is that the Magento Expert Consulting Group has built a rule set that actually understands Magento and the complexity of Magento. Admittedly, PHP Code Sniffer does not do the intense static analysis things that we expect of a full-blown tool, like taint analysis or code flow graphs. It does not build these things. So in a way, it's less powerful than a full-blown tool, but none of the full-blown tools understand Magento complexity anyway. So this is the best that we have. And the great thing about it is that it is extendable. We already have a base rule set that was built by the guys at Magento headquarters, and is also open source, that I personally am committing to and making pull requests to improve it. If, as a community, we start building on this a little bit more. And I mean, the GitHub account had, some work. Actually, there was one a little bit newer than that, 2 months ago. So there's work happening on it, a little bit slower than we'd expect, but this is a small tool. The nice thing about it is that it integrates with pretty much everything that we use, because it's a Linux command line tool. So how many of you use PHP Snowman? 1, 2, 3. And what about Git? Yeah, even more people use Git. And what about Jenkins? Okay, so this is all popular tools that we all use in Magento development. And the interesting thing is that Code Sniffer just works with them all to the box. It's incredibly simple. And I'm going to run through a demo right now. It's going to be short, just to show you how quick it is to use PHP Code Sniffer to find some bugs, some security concerns, using the ECG rule set on a Magento 2 extension. So I'm just going to jump off presentation mode, and maybe this thing is going to stay here. Did you guys still hear me? So this is a website. this is the website. But all you need, oh, one sec. Displays, arrangement, where displays? Better? So this is the ECG coding standard for Magento 2. These rules on this GitHub link teaches PHP Code Sniffer how Magento works and the kind of things that may exist in Magento that will be a security vulnerability. I'm not going to show you how to install PHP Code Sniffer because everyone's operating system is different, but I'll show you how to install this coding standard onto PHP Code Sniffer so it knows about Magento. And the interesting thing is that it's really just 2 lines that you need to put into a terminal. It goes like this. And I'm literally going to copy paste. Because I didn't know if I was going to have network or not, but what I did is I checked out that code sniffer rule set on my desktop. And right next to this, I have a Magento 2 extension that was built by a friend of mine. We're going to find a bug in it, and I already spoken to him about it, so it's all okay. So this is our coding standard, and this is the Magento 2 extension. So if I do PHP CS, config set, install parts, and I give it the path to my coding standard, which would be users. That's my username, desktop, coding standard. That's all. It says that the install parts is updated successfully, and the all value. So yeah, the all value is gone. And then literally all you need to do. Okay, so let's say I run PHP Code Sniffer without a standard on this module. It's going to give me a bunch of default problems that it may have found. Okay, but we're not interested in that because, as I said, a lot of these tools don't understand Magento. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell PHP Code Sniffer to do the same thing, but use the ECG Magento 2 rule set. Okay? And we're going to say run it on this plugin. What? Oh, wait, typo. So now it's given me a smaller list of problems, but these are all aware of the Magento framework. And then if you notice, some of these are actually just warnings. So I'm just going to tell PHP Code Sniffer to just ignore warnings. Actually, let's clear the screen so we see it. So the Code Sniffer is just going to ignore the warnings and say, give me the actual errors in this Magento plugin that may be, something's going wrong. And it's like, oh, look, we have a function called user_func_array is forbidden. And the reason this is forbidden is because this function actually takes the name of another function that you could pass. And it becomes a security concern because then you could tell, if you're a lead hacker, you could probably tell PHP to run a function that is not expected to be run. Okay? So we have a problem. We know what file it is in, agent.php, and we know it's on line 77. And the nice thing about this is, despite the fact that this is just command line, it's incredibly easy to set up in PHP Storm. And I'll show you how to get this done really quickly. If you're using PHP Storm, all you need to do is open Preferences, Language, PHP. Oh, and look, there's a code sniffer setting. And all you need to do is put in the actual path to your code sniffer. So we need to say which PHP CS. Okay. So we put this in here. I'll zoom in so you see what's going on. Okay. I'm just going to say validate. Okay. PHP Storm found our code sniffer. And that's literally all we need to do to include the code sniffer in PHP Storm. But if we do this, we need to like manually tell PHP Storm, look for problems in our code base. We can make it one step easier. We go to editor, inspections, and if you notice there's a PHP code sniffer validation checkbox which is not checked. We just turn this guy on and we tell it to use, oh look, ECGM2, nice, okay. Now if we open the same module in PHP Storm and we open this file, I just know what the file, the error is. If you notice here, PHP Code Sniffer has found the actual spot in the code and it gives you the exact same problem. Hey, we're using call user function array, which is dangerous. It's a dangerous function to use. So maybe you want to like not use that. So let's just say, so if I just use a different function, that underline is gone. Okay? So while we're writing code, we have this PHP code sniffer, which is actively looking at our code, and it understands Magento, and it guides us towards not making silly mistakes that will probably be a security concern later on. And this is the best we can hope for right now, because this is what we want with static analysis. We can't get the very deep control flow graphs, which are part of the bigger tools, but this is good enough for what we need now. And I'm just going to start closing up now. Apart from PHP Storm, ClamAV and PHP Code Sniffer are both free tools. They're open source. You still need to do a little bit of work because they're not a silver bullet. You just can't run it and expect them to fix your code by itself. You still need to do a little bit of work, okay? And it's what I call is what a lot of people call defensive depth. When you're securing a Magento store, the more layers of defense you have, the stronger your store becomes and the more confidence you have in your own store. And that's where we should be going as a Magento community when it comes to securing our stores. The future, I just want to use 1 minute to talk about where this could be improved. The rule set from ECG, while it is a very good start and it works with both Magento 1 and Magento 2, we could add more rules. I'm personally going to start working towards committing and doing pull requests for more rules on that. And if you do come across any sort of security issues that you think would benefit from having a rule in the code sniffer or the ECG rule set, it is open source and we all know how to use GitHub. It took me a long time to learn GitHub, admittedly, but so we just do a pull request onto the Magento ECG rule set, and we'll be improving it for everyone. Another direction we could go with this in the future is we could take one of the existing tools which does not understand Magento right now and fails horribly when it tries to analyze Magento and customize it to be aware of Magento. Admittedly, that's a large undertaking, but it's something that I see we can get to if there's a demand enough within the community for a tool that will provide deeper analysis and also work with Magento. But apart from that, that's all I wanted to cover today, and I know the tools that I've shown you are not perfect, but they're good enough. And good enough is what's going to keep us one step off the attackers. Because right now the attacks, the most common attacks are basic, and this is one step ahead of them. And that's it. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
ありがとうございました。お時間ありますので、何か質問ある方、手を挙げてください。
2年ぐらい前に、とMagentoのルールセットを 関数のリストを持って、例えばそれをパターンマッチングしているとか、あるいはコードフローの解析をやっているとか、レベル的にはどういったステータスにあるかとか、そういうのがもしお分かりでしたら教えていただきたい。
So the question was that 2 years ago he was using the rule set and it was basic. It has evolved since then. There's a little bit more work happening. If you look, and I think I have internet. Oh, no internet. So under ECG, oh wait, no, I could show you here. Yeah. Coding standard. I'll put this in. What I want to say is that if we look at this right now, it does. So it has been evolving since then, and now there's some security. There's some security things, and yes, as I said, it's not a very deep analysis. It does pattern matching, but the majority of attacks we're seeing right now on Magento sites are not complicated enough to even get past this. They're basic attacks. So my purpose in encouraging the use of PHP code sniffer is to take developers that one step further right now. Okay? Magento 2 is what we're looking at right now, if you see my mouse. It only has one file with security, but Magento 1 has more, right? There's forbidden files and there's super global stuff, but as you said, it is pattern matching. What we're looking for is where a developer may have been cutting some corners or being lazy. That's what we want. We're not making it work automatically. We're just trying to find where developers have been lazy, because that's where security problems start. So we close it there. Does that answer your question?
It's worth noting that did you mention the extension quality program?
No.
Because that's a whole other set of static analysis tools that you can run your code through.
Yes, that hasn't had as much changes lately, but yes, there is the if you're building extensions for the marketplace, there is a different set of tools and checks that they will require you to go through. Not something I covered today.